As a young boy, I was always aware that what people said was not always what they really meant or felt. I also knew that it was possible to get others to do what I wanted if I read their real feelings and responded appropriately to their needs. At the age of 11, I began my sales career by selling rubber sponges from door to door after school to make pocket money. I quickly figured out how to tell if someone was likely to buy from me or not. When I knocked on the door, if someone told me to go away but their hands were open and they showed their palms, I knew it was safe to keep trying. No matter how negative they may have sounded, their open hands showed me that they weren't aggressive. On the other hand, if someone told me to go away in a soft voice, but used a pointed finger or closed hand, I knew it was time to leave. As a teenager, I became a magazine salesperson, selling at night. My ability to read people's body language earned me enough money to buy my first house. I joined the life insurance business at the age of 20 and went on to break several sales records at my company. I became the youngest person to sell over $1 million worth of business in my first year. It turned out that the techniques I had learned as a boy in reading body language through my experience in selling sponges and magazines were directly related to the success I could have in any situation involving people. Most researchers now agree that words are used mainly for giving information, while body language is used for communicating attitudes and feelings. In some cases, however, body language can be used as a substitute for verbal messages. Reading body language is a skill that can be learned because in any culture, words and body movements occur together in highly predictable patterns. Thus, a well-trained person can tell what movement someone is making simply by listening to what he or she is saying. A person who is trying to read body language can also guess which country someone is from just by watching his or her gestures. Touching is the language of physical intimacy. Because of this, touch can be the most powerful of all the communication channels. In May 1985, Bridget Gurney was trapped for 6 hours beneath a collapsed construction crane in New York City. Throughout her ordeal, she held the hand of a rescue worker who stayed by her side as heavy machinery removed the tons of twisted steel from her crushed legs. A stranger's touch gave her hope and the will to live. Touch appears to affect the sexes differently. Women sometimes react much more favorably to touch than men. In an interesting study, psychologists asked a group of nurses to lightly touch a patient once or twice shortly before the patient underwent surgery. The touching produced a strongly positive reaction, but only among women. It appeared to lower their blood pressure and anxiety levels both before and after surgery. For men, however, the touching proved to be very upsetting. Their blood pressure and anxiety levels both rose. The psychologists suspect that because men are taught to be more stoic, that is, to hide their feelings and to ignore their fears, the touching rattled them by reminding them that life is fragile. How do you feel about touching and not being touched? Some salespeople think they know. Research shows that it is harder to say no to someone who touches you when making a request. But not everyone is happy about being touched by a stranger. Think about your own comfort level when you find yourself in a crowd. Are you relaxed and loose, or does physical contact make you feel awkward and tense? In some situations, we can't help touching each other. Take a crowded elevator, for instance. Normally, people stand shoulder to shoulder and arm to arm, accepting such close contact without complaint. The rule seems to be touch only from shoulder to elbow, but nowhere else. Even though the Japanese are regarded as a non-touching society, their crowded cities force them to be jammed into subways and trains. Edward T. Hall, an anthropologist, says the Japanese handle their uneasiness about being packed into public places by avoiding eye contact and drawing within themselves emotionally, thus touching without feeling. The impact of exposure to violent video games has not been studied as extensively as the impact of exposure to TV or movie violence. The research is right. However, on the whole, the results reported for video games until now are very similar to those obtained in the investigations of TV and movie violence. Among the effects of violent game playing are increases in physiological arousal and physically aggressive behavior, such as hitting, kicking, and pulling clothes or hair. Studies also have found a reduction in helpful behavior among youths exposed to violent video games. Males tend to prefer action-oriented video games involving shooting, fighting, sports, action-adventure, fantasy role-playing, and strategy, according to the Michigan State Survey. Females prefer classic board games, trivia quizzes, and puzzles. Electronic game playing gets young people involved with technologies and opens up opportunities in high-paying tech careers, notes Communications Professor Bradley Greenberg of Michigan State. It is believed that these opportunities go to boys because they spend more time working with electronic games and computers, says Greenberg. If girls become more involved with technology at an early age, it is likely that the interest in technology will continue into the work world. If females do become more involved in technology fields, including game development, they may create less violent games that promote cooperation rather than aggression. Video games are in 80% of U.S. homes with children. They generated $6 billion in 2000 and $11 billion by 2003. All indications are that the industry will continue to grow at a healthy rate, says Greenberg. The emerging market is for games designed more with girls in mind that engage them for longer periods of time and force them to further investigate the technology behind the games. The next frontier involves transferring video game technology to educational settings and using the young people's fascination with the games to involve them more with innovative teaching technologies. Until that day comes, however, more awareness is needed of the impact of violent games on young people's behavior, Anderson and his colleagues conclude. Even with the hard work and caring of many dedicated teachers and concerned parents, the U.S. continues to have the reading problem, according to the National Center for Educational Information. 38% of fourth grade students cannot read and understand a short paragraph of the type found in a simple children's book. Results from a 1998 study showed that 60% of U.S. teenagers could comprehend specific facts, but fewer than 5% could elaborate on the meanings of the material read. No wonder many parents are discouraged, but they needn't be. By doing simple things like reading to the child, sharing their thinking about what they read, In telling their child stories, they can help develop the foundation needed for children to become good readers and learn that reading is not a chore but a lifetime adventure. Good readers follow a number of key strategies, whether they are reading a magazine or a textbook. Firstly, they create a wide range of mental and visual images as they read, to feel involved with what they are reading. Then they use their background and relevant prior knowledge before, during, and after reading to enhance their understanding of what they are reading. They also make and ask questions before, during, and after reading to clarify meaning, make predictions, and focus their attention on what's important. Good readers infer and determine the most important ideas or themes, and distinguish between these and unimportant information. Next, they track their thinking while reading to get the overall meaning. Finally, if they have trouble understanding specific words, phrases, or longer passages, they use a wide range of problem-solving strategies, including skipping ahead, rereading, asking questions, using a dictionary, and reading the passage aloud to fix up their understanding. Reading is fundamental to success in life. It's that simple. Reading opens the door to virtually all other learning. You have to be able to read to learn mathematics, science, history, engineering, mechanics, political science, not to mention to surf the web or figure out how to operate that new DVD player. Basically, you have to be able to read to succeed. People may decide to study foreign languages for various reasons. They may do so for the immediate purpose of satisfying the requirements of some public examination or of getting greater fun and enjoyment out of a holiday abroad. Business people may have to deal directly or indirectly with various kinds of information from abroad. Research workers may realize the importance of being able to read the latest reports of advances made in their studies as soon as they are published in foreign journals, without waiting for a translator who may or may not have the ability to make an exact translation with 100% accuracy. People may be keenly interested in the activities of a foreign nation for political reasons. They may need information about current affairs that foreign newspapers and journals alone can deliver. Students of literature must surely be able to read great works firsthand. Learning a new language implies entering a new world, and it inevitably leads to a widening of intellectual experience. Learning a new language well enough to be able to understand it when heard, to speak it, read it, and write it is such hard training that we certainly need some strong urge to drive us on. The four distinct and separable activities just mentioned, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, call for a constant, preferably daily exercise. These activities are concerned in varying degrees with four aspects of language study: pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and idiom. It is useful to keep these four activities and four aspects clearly in mind. Learning a new language calls for no great originality of mind or critical talent, but it does demand an eager intellectual curiosity and a constant and lively interest in the endless ways in which human ideas may be expressed. It demands quick observation, first of all, reasonable ability to mimic and imitate, good powers of association and generalization, and a good memory. A modern supermarket is a thing of wonder. Even if it's snowing outside and the summer is a distant memory, you can buy strawberries, peaches, or grapes. If you want root vegetables in the middle of a heat wave, you can have them. Expert Americans can have their Oreo cookies, while homesick New Zealanders can console themselves with wine and kiwi fruits. Within days of being picked off the vines, the fruit is in your trolley, tasting of spring as the leaves are falling outside. It's all great until you start contemplating the vast mileage sitting in your shopping basket. Those kiwi fruits have traveled nearly 20,000 kilometers or 12,000 miles. They fly in a plane and traveled by road. By the time they reach the supermarket, they are responsible for 5 times their own weight in greenhouse gases being pumped into the atmosphere. Increasingly, our food is coming from farther and farther away, and we are becoming more and more dependent on the fuel it takes to get them to us. This dependence was illustrated very clearly during the September 2000 fuel price protest in Britain, inspired by similar actions in France. A group of farmers and lorry drivers decided to blockade the Stanlow oil refinery in Cheshire. The protest quickly snowballed, and petrol tankers were unable to leave refineries. Panic buying saw more than 90% of petrol stations run dry, and with supplies unable to get through, supermarket shelves quickly emptied. It's estimated that food now accounts for as much as 40% of all UK road freight, and the international food trade is increasing faster than the world's population and food production. In other words, food is moving around more than ever, and the environmental impact could be huge. Despite the UK's cool climate being perfectly suited for growing apples, nearly 3/4 of the apples in the UK are imported, and more than 60% of Britain's apple orchards have been destroyed in the past 30 years. We're now putting more energy into transporting some crops than we get out of eating them. For every calorie of lettuce imported to the UK from America's west coast, 127 calories of fuel are used. Put it another way, flying over a kilogram of Californian lettuce uses enough energy to keep a 100-watt light bulb glowing for 8 days. On April 4, 2003, Glenn Keane, one of Walt Disney's most respected animals, called for a meeting to discuss a war breaking out at the studio. Disney's animators had settled into 2 opposing camps, those who were skilled in computer animation and those who refused to give up their pencils. Keane, a 31-year veteran who created The Beast for Beauty and the Beast and Ariel for The Little Mermaid, and was a Disney traditionalist, but after a series of experiments to see whether he could create a computer-animated ballerina, his opposition softened. So he invited the 50 animators to discuss the pros and cons of both art forms, calling his seminar the best of both worlds. For an hour, Keane listed the pluses and minuses of each technique, while the other animators listened quietly. After a few questions, the crowd burst into chatter as animators shouted over one another, some arguing that computers should now replace people, and others expressing fears that they would be forced to draw by hand. In a recent interview, Keane recalled that Kevin Geiger, a computer animation supervisor, then stood up and demanded of him, "If you can do all this cool stuff that you're talking about, that you want to see in animation, but you have to give up the pencil to do it. Are you in?" Keane hesitated before answering, "I'm in." 3 weeks later, the company's animators were told that Disney would concentrate on making computer-animated movies, abandoning a 70-year-old hand-drawn tradition in favor of a style popularized by newer and more successful rivals like Pixar Animation Studios and DreamWorks Animation. The results were nothing short of a cultural revolution at the studio, which is famous for the hand-drawn classics championed by its founder, Walt Disney, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Peter Pan. 2.5 years after that decision, Disney released Chicken Little, the first of 4 computer-animated films developed at the newly reorganized studio. The company hoped that this movie, along with others like the Meet Robinson, American Dog, and King's Rapunzel Unbraided, would return Disney to its past glory. There was a lot more than a pride, however, riding on its success. Animation was once Disney's heart, a profitable lifeline that fed the company's theme park, book, and home video divisions, and restoring profit was as essential to Disney in those days as regaining its reputation. Casey Nicole was a 19-year-old girl from Kansas dying of cancer, or so believed that thousands of people who visited her website or on which she kept a diary of her fight against cancer. For over a year, Casey Nicole had added updates to her diary, letting people know about the ups and downs of her struggle with the disease, about her hope when her condition temporarily improved, and about her fear when the cancer reappeared. Casey's mother, Debbie, maintained a companion journal in which she discussed what it was like caring for a child with cancer. Many people grew extremely close to Casey. They communicated with her via email, chatted with her in online chat rooms, and some even phoned her. Then, on May 15, 2001, Casey Nicole died from bleeding in the brain. Her online friends despaired. They sought for ways to express their sorrow. They wanted to send gifts to her family. Some even wanted to attend her funeral. And that's when things began to get suspicious. Casey's mother refused to provide anyone with information about where the funeral was being held or where to send gifts. This prompted a group of individuals who participated in the online community Metafilter to find out what was going on. What they discovered was disturbing. Casey's death had not been recorded by any obituary they could locate, nor could anyone remember ever having met Casey in person. They began to wonder if Casey actually existed. Their fears were proved a few days later when Debbie Swanson, 40-year-old woman from Kansas, confessed that she had invented Casey and written all the diary entries herself. The photos of Casey that appeared on the site were simply pictures of a neighbor, used without the neighbor's knowledge. Whenever anyone had thought that they were emailing Casey, it was actually Debbie they were communicating with. Debbie Swanson remained unwilling to admit her fault in her confessions, claiming that Casey was real in a way, because the character of Casey was a blend of a number of cancer victims whom Debbie had known. She added that she hadn't realized so many people were reading the diary. This hardly satisfied the thousands of people who felt cheated because their kindness and sympathy had been taken advantage of. The FBI even looked into the case, but determined that because Debbie Swanson hadn't gained money from the hoax, she hadn't actually committed a crime which was serious enough to take her to court. The internet is very much like television in that it takes time away from other pursuits, provides entertainment and information, but in no way can compare with the warm, personal experience of reading a good book. This is not the only reason why the internet will never replace books, for books provide a sufficient knowledge of a subject that sitting in front of a computer monitor cannot provide. We can transfer text from an internet source, but the artistic quality of seeds of transferred text leave much to be desired. A well-designed book makes the reading experience important. The book is still the most compact and economical means of conveying a lot of knowledge in a convenient package, and this is what makes it popular. The idea that one can carry in one's pocket a play by Shakespeare, a novel by Charles Dickens, or the Bible in a small book with a stiff paper cover is incredible. We take such uncommon convenience for granted, not realizing that the book itself has undergone quite an evolution since the production of the Greenberg Bible in 1455 and Shakespeare's Book of Plays in 1623. Not only has the art and craft of printing and making books been greatly improved over the centuries, but the great variety of subject matter now available in books is surprising, to say the least. In fact, the internet requires the constant entry of authors and their books to obtain the information that makes it a useful tool for research and learning. Another important reason why the internet will never replace books is because those who wish to become writers want to see their works permanently published as books, something you can hold, see, feel, look through, and read at your leisure without the need for an electric current apart from a lamp. The writer may use a computer instead of a pen and a pad, but the finished product must eventually end up as a book if it is to have value to the reading public. The writer may use the internet in the course of researching a subject, just as he may use a library for that purpose, but the end product will still be a book. In any public space, there will be groups of people having face-to-face conversations. These conversations are not perceived as annoying. No one is suggesting that there should be railway carriages where people are not allowed to speak to one another. Logically, the sound energy created by two people conversing face-to-face should be twice that created by one person conversing with an unheard partner on their mobile phone. Yet the latter appears to be more annoying. There are a number of possible explanations for this puzzle. One is that the content or the volume of the conversation tends to be more annoying in some mobile phone conversations because of the way that people choose to use their mobile phones. Some people may speak very loudly, or they may have chosen loud and intrusive ringing tones. Excessive loudness is a major cause of annoyance for all sorts of sounds. It is possible that people's perceptions are colored by just one or two bad experiences of intrusive mobile phone use, or reflect media concerns over new technology. Another possible factor is the novelty of the mobile phone technology. People are used to others having face-to-face conversations in public spaces and have learned to ignore them. The mobile phone is relatively new and hence more noticeable. In the United Kingdom, almost 70% of households now own at least one mobile phone. However, such widespread usage is still relatively new. People today are worried about food safety. As a result, the popularity of organic farming of fruits and vegetables is increasing. But what exactly does organic farming mean? It is probably easier to explain what organic farming is not. Organic farming does not use pesticides or fertilizers. Instead, this style of farming uses natural methods to protect plants and help them grow. So, organic agricultural products are thought to be generally safer than non-organic ones. In the United States, about 2% of all food is grown using organic methods. The U.S. government officially licenses farms as organic if they pass an examination. Presently, there are about 10,000 licensed farmers in the U.S., and this number is growing by about 20% a year. In addition to food safety, Another reason for the popularity of organic fruits and vegetables is that they taste better. This is why many restaurants only buy organic products. A lot of people think organic farming is not competitive compared to other methods because it cannot grow the same quantity of food. However, new research has shown that organic farming only grows on average about 5% less than non-organic methods. Still, organic food today is more expensive than non-organic food. But when the environmental and health costs of non-organic farming are considered, such as the pollution of water by pesticides, most people would agree that the higher price of organic farming is in fact a small price to pay for our health and safety. Doctors have long told patients that medicine is something you swallow in a pill, but evidence is growing that shows the best medicine might be found in your grocery store, not your drugstore. More and more researchers are concluding that the right foods will not only prevent disease, but in some cases actually cure it as well. Most major diseases can be reversed through approaches using good nutrition, said Dr. Joe Furman, a doctor who specializes in nutritional medicine as an alternative to surgery and drugs. Furman is the author of a book about eating for health. Food is more effective than medicine, he stated. All we've got to do is eat right, and disease melts away. Some other doctors find Furman's views on food and disease a bit extreme, but he is not alone in his belief that diet plays an important role in human health. Researchers at the University of Illinois are conducting a major program to identify food components that can fight disease and promote good health. One of the major foods being investigated is the soybean. There has been a tremendous amount of information that shows the soybean's ability to reduce cholesterol, said Claire M. Hassler, director of the research program at the University of Illinois, and by lowering the cholesterol, you lower the risks for heart disease. In one of the 3 clinical tests on human performed at the university, a diet that included 50 grams of soybean extract per day in the form of drinks and baked foods was found to be significant in reducing cholesterol in a 4-week period, according to Hassler. She cautions that people with high cholesterol levels should see a doctor, but said soybean products can safely be introduced into the diet as part of an overall health improvement strategy. According to Dr. Keith Block, the soybean is one of the most powerful medicines and is a great food to prevent disease. It probably has significant treatment benefits for cancer patients. Soybeans contain a compound that naturally stops the supply of nutrients and blood that cancer needs to grow. At Block's private clinics, he uses what he calls nutritional therapy as one component for treating cancer patients. Ordinary household dogs with only a few weeks of basic puppy training learn to accurately distinguish between breath samples of lung and breast cancer patients and healthy subjects. Our study provides strong evidence that cancers hidden beneath the skin can be detected simply by dogs examining the smell of a person's breath, said Michael McCulloch, who led the research. Early detection of cancers greatly improves a patient's survival chances, and the researchers hope that man's best friend, the dog, can become an important tool in finding cancers early. The new study is scheduled to appear in the March issue of the journal Integrative Cancer Therapies was conducted by the Pine Street Foundation, a cancer research organization in San Anselmo, California. Dogs can identify chemical traces in the range of parts per trillion. Previous studies have confirmed the ability of trained dogs to detect skin cancer by smelling the skin damage. Also, some researchers hope to prove dogs can detect prostate cancer by smelling patients' urine. Dogs' scent ability to detect the scent of cancer was something that was often discussed for many years, but we felt it was appropriate to design a thorough study that seriously investigated this topic to see if it is really effective, said Nicholas Brockman, executive director of the Pine Street Foundation. Lung and breast cancer patients are known to breathe out patterns of biochemical markers in their breath. Cancer cells produce different metabolic waste products than normal cells, Brockman said. The differences between these metabolic products are so great that they can be detected by a dog's skin sense of smell, even in the early stages of disease. The researchers used a food reward-based method to train 5 ordinary household dogs, encountering breath samples captured in tubes. The dogs gave a positive identification of a cancer patient by sitting in front of the correct sign. By scent alone, the dogs distinguished 55 lung and 31 breast cancer patients from 83 healthy humans. The results of the study showed that the dog could detect breast cancer and lung cancer between 88 and 97% of the time. The high degree of accuracy persisted whether the patients were smokers or not. Moreover, it did not seem to matter which dog it was or which stage the cancer had reached. If everybody on Earth consumed as much oil as the average American, the world's known reserves would be gone in a decade. If not current rates of consumption, known reserves would not last through the current century. Experts, however, are not worried. New technologies, they say, will avert the global energy crisis. Already, oil companies have developed cheaper ways to find oil and extract it from the ground, effectively extending the supply into the 22nd century. Still, there is a finite amount of oil on the planet, and someday it will be gone. Even before that happens, concerns about global warming may compel the world to stop burning so much fossil fuel. The energy industry is preparing for that day by investing in technologies that will replace fossil fuels. Solar, nuclear, and wind power are all possibilities, but many experts say the most likely candidate is a fuel cell. A fuel cell is essentially a hydrogen-powered battery that produces no pollution. Its only byproduct is water, and since hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, supply should not be a problem. This all depends, however, on the technology being developed. Neglect of the mind-body link by technological medicine is actually a brief aberration when viewed against the whole history of the healing art and traditional tribal medicine and in Western practice from its beginning in the work of Hippocrates. The need to operate through the patient's mind has always been recognized. Until the 19th century, medical writers really failed to note the influence of grief, despair, or discouragement on the onset and outcome of illness, nor did they ignore the healing effects of faith, confidence, and peace of mind. Contentment used to be considered a prerequisite for health. The modern medicine man has gained so much power over certain diseases through drugs However, he has forgotten about the potential strength within the patient. One elderly physician friend recently told me of reading the diary of his uncle, also doctor. In the early years, the diarist always recorded what happened to the individual or the community prior to an illness or epidemic. But as medicine became more technological, this part of the history grew less and less important to him, and finally was omitted altogether. Awareness of the mind's powers was lost as medicine cast out all soft data, the information that's not easily quantified or scientific. A fly can do one thing extremely well. Fly. Recently, a team of British scientists declared that the common housefly is the most talented aerodynamicist on the planet, superior to any bird, bat, or bee. A housefly can make 6 turns a second, hover, fly straight up, down, or backward, land on the ceiling, and perform various other short maneuvers. And he has a brain smaller than a sesame seed. Michael Dickinson, who studies fly flight in his lab at the California Institute of Technology, says the housefly is actually the best flyer. Hoverflies are the be-all and end-all. He says they can hover in one spot, dash to another location, and then race back to their original hovering point precisely. Scientists, engineers, and military researchers want to know how creatures with such small brains can do that. Maybe they could reverse engineer a fly. Maybe they could reverse engineer a fly to make a robotic device that could reconnoiter dangerous places such as earthquake zones or collapsed mines. Dickinson's laboratory works with fruit flies. Researchers put them in chambers and manipulate the visual field, filming the flies in super slow motion, 6,000 frames a second. Dickinson is interested in knowing how flies avoid collisions. He has found that certain patterns, such as 90-degree turns, are triggered by visual cues and two equilibrium organs on their backs that function like a gyroscope. Flies have only a dozen muscles for maneuvering, but they are loaded with sensors. In addition to their compound eyes, which permit panoramic imagery and are excellent at detecting motion, they have wind-sensitive hairs and antennae. They also have 3 light sensors on the tops of their heads, which tell them which way is up. Roughly 2/3 of a fly's entire nerve system is devoted to processing visual images. They take all this sensory data and boil it down to a few basic commands, such as go left and go right.